Now that we know how retailers set initial prices, let's talk about how we mark prices down. It's inevitable that in retail, you're going to have to discount your products. And there's two main reasons why a retailer might have to do a markdown. The first is because they need to dispose of the merchandise. And so we call that clearance markdowns. The second reason that a retailer might mark down their prices is to generate sales. And we call that set of markdowns promotional markdowns. So we're going to talk about clearance markdowns first, and then we'll have a discussion on promotional markdowns. So a clearance markdown is used to get rid of slow-moving, obsolete merchandise. And the reason we want to get rid of this slow-moving merchandise is because we want to make room for new products in our retail store. And so this could be merchandise that's just selling at a slower rate than planned. It could be merchandise that is seasonal or is going to become obsolete at the end of a season. In Chapter 12, we discussed that slow-selling merchandise can decrease our inventory turnover, which prevents buyers from acquiring merchandise. And it can also diminish the retailer's image because we don't want to be known for selling old styles or old trends or last season's merchandise. So we try to use clearance merchandise. And when we clearance out our merchandise, when we are moving it out of the store, there's a few methods of liquidation that we have to use. And so let's talk about the 6 general liquidation strategies, because even with planning, some merchandise just won't move. So we have to get our merchandise out of the store. One thing a retailer will do when they are trying to liquidate merchandise is to consolidate unsold merchandise at just one or a few of their locations. This could be moving it to one of your outlet stores. It could be moving it to a certain region of the country. For example, if you have extra flip-flops in your Michigan and Minnesota stores in October, you might send those to your California stores or your Florida stores because they're likely to still be able to sell flip-flops later into the season. Doing this means that you can sometimes still recover not just the cost of the product, but you can probably still make some kind of profit on that product as well. In addition to consolidating unsold merchandise, retailers will often try to sell merchandise at an internet auction. So some retailers have their own eBay sites. Some retailers will post merchandise through Amazon. Some retailers will use their own website for clearance items. But they'll try to sell it online because even though it hasn't been selling in the store as well, maybe they can sell it online and still make a little bit of a profit. If it's not selling online and consolidating isn't working, another thing that a retailer can do to liquidate merchandise is to sell to another retailer. So this happens when a department store, a specialty store, or a category specialist sells their merchandise to an off-price retailer like TJ Maxx or Marshalls or Home Goods. And retailers are still able to recoup some of the cost of the merchandise. So if they bought a shirt from a vendor for $15, they might be able to sell it to an off-price retailer for $10. So even though the retailer is still losing money here, they're not losing as much as they would if they didn't sell it at all. So they're able to recoup some of the cost by selling it to another retailer. If another retailer won't buy it, another strategy that the retailer can try is to return it to the vendor. So we talked about this in the negotiation section of Chapter 12. Some large retailers are able to negotiate a return of last season's merchandise that did not sell. And so the vendor will then take it back, and the vendor will then try to sell it to another retailer. If none of that is working, we can carry our merchandise into next season. And this can be used mostly for high-priced, non-fashion merchandise, such as men's clothing or furniture, because those don't change much with the season. So we can store them in our distribution center or our warehouses and then get them back out when it's time to sell them again. We do have some profit loss because we're incurring some inventory costs, but it's not as much of a loss as it would be for some of these other strategies. If we don't want to carry the merchandise in the next season, An option we have is to donate it to charity. If we donate our merchandise to charity, we are losing everything we paid for it. The cost value is sometimes deductible on the retailer's tax liability as a donation, but you're still losing almost all of the costs that you paid for that product. The benefit here is that charitable giving by the company always looks good as a corporate practice. So if you don't have the option of returning your merchandise to the vendor, selling it to another retailer, or carrying it into the next season, sometimes donating it is just the way to go. So the way that these options are listed on your screen are generally the order that the retailer is going to try to do these things in. If we consolidate the unsold merchandise or we sell it at an internet auction, we can generally still make a profit on that merchandise. It won't be as high as a profit as we wanted, but we can make the profit. Carrying the merchandise into next season also allows us to make a little bit of a profit. If we are returning it to the vendor, hopefully we're breaking even. So they're going to give us back exactly what we paid for it. If we sell to another retailer, we lose money, but we don't lose as much money as if we were to donate to charity. So different retailers have different strategies for liquidating merchandise. Most of them are going to start with the top two options, and then based on their retail strategy, determine how they want to liquidate. So that's clearance markdowns. Let's talk about promotional markdowns. Retailers have promotional markdowns in an effort to increase their sales and promote merchandise for a short period of time. There are a couple pricing techniques we're going to walk through. The first pricing technique is what we call first-degree price discrimination. With first-degree price discrimination, which is a type of promotional pricing, we are going to set unique prices for each customer based on their willingness to pay. Ideally, retailers would completely maximize their profits if they charged each customer a different amount that the customer is willing to pay for each product that they buy. So first-degree price discrimination is completely legal. It's most commonly used by auto dealers, real estate agents, and online auction sites. So it is not practical for the average retailer with a storefront to use first-degree price discrimination, because it would make it difficult to post prices. Customers would feel like they were being treated unfairly, and they would just not be happy with it. Now, when you walk into a car dealership, each customer is going to tell the salesman their willingness to pay, and then potentially each customer would pay a different price for the exact same car. So that's first-degree price discrimination. So second-degree price discrimination is offering a multiple price schedule to all of your customers. So these are things like promotions, coupons, price bundling, and quantity discounts. So the retailer is going to set up a price schedule, and they're going to offer it to every customer who comes in the store. So if I'm having a 30% off sale this week, a promotion, every customer is going to be able to get that percentage off of their purchase. Quantity discounts would be if you buy 10 or more, you get them for $1 each, and every customer who buys 10 or more products gets the discount. So second-degree price discrimination is offering every customer the same discount. Let's talk about third-degree price discrimination. Third-degree price discrimination happens when retailers charge different prices to different segments, and they are generally based on demographics or your geographic location. So an example of this would be movie theaters. Movie theaters often offer a lower price for college students or senior citizens. And you generally have to show your college ID, or you have to show your driver's license to prove you're a certain age. These prices are posted. So the college discount is posted, the senior citizen discount is posted, and it's completely legal to charge different segments different prices at your retail store. So that's an example of how demographic price discrimination works. Now with geographic, we call that zone pricing. And zone pricing is the practice of charging different prices in different stores, markets, or regions. So if you've ever been shopping online and you've been asked to enter your zip code before you see the price in your shopping cart, that's an example of zone pricing. And it is generally based on You might get charged a higher price if you live further away from a retailer's distribution center, because they have to spend a bit more time and effort in getting that product delivered to you. Pricing in the airport Starbucks versus pricing in a regular Starbucks, you're always going to pay a little bit more in the airport for your product. And so Starbucks has pricing schedules for their airport locations that are very different from their standard locations, and that's an example of zone pricing based on geography. So think of other types of demographic or geographic pricing that you've seen in different retailers, and you can talk about that in the Chapter 14 discussion boards. Third-degree price discrimination has the most discussion of legality and ethics. So some consumers would say that it's unethical to give a discount to a group of people based on their age, or it's unethical to give a group of consumers a discount based on the fact that they are in college. And so you often see this type of promotional markdowns discussed most commonly in terms of ethics and legality. So there's a couple other pricing techniques that I want to bring your attention to. One is a leader pricing. Leader pricing is the practice of pricing certain items lower in an effort to get people into the store to boost overall sales. So you might have seen Burger King this summer is offering 50-cent ice cream cones. And they've been advertising 50-cent ice cream cones on the signs outside their store. They've had a couple of television commercials, a couple of radio commercials. And the reason that they're offering 50-cent ice cream cones is they're hoping that consumers will come into the store for the 50-cent ice cream cone, but also go ahead and buy a value meal while they're there. So eat dinner first and then get your ice cream after. Kroger commonly offers a gallon of milk for $1.29, which is very low for a gallon of milk. And the reason they're willing to offer a very low price on milk is because they want consumers to come into the store and, in addition to buying milk, hopefully buy bread, eggs, and other items as well. So leader pricing is lowering one item to get people in to buy lots of others. So another strategy that retailers employ with pricing is what we call odd pricing. Odd pricing refers to the practice of using a price that ends in an odd number. And this is typically a 9, sometimes an 8. There's a lot of history behind odd pricing and a lot of theories that have been developed over the years. But one thing that's been found is that consumers don't pay attention to the last few digits. So they might see a price that says $5.49, and the consumer is likely to say, okay, it's $5. All right, so a consumer is not going to acknowledge that 49 cents. They're going to think it's $5, and that's going to seem low. A lot of times when consumers see $9.98, again, they just associate that $9. They don't think about the 98 cents. So if you're going to sell a value meal and you sell it at $9.98, you're going to sell a lot more value meals than if you price it at $10. Because from a consumer psychology perspective, consumers don't really pay attention to those last couple of digits. So those are two other pricing strategies. We're going to move on to the last topic in Chapter 14 and talk about a few legal and ethical pricing issues that impact retailers when they set prices. The first issue is predatory pricing. Predatory pricing arises when a dominant retailer sets prices below cost to drive their competitors out of business. So we are setting a price below cost. So we're willing to take a loss on our profit in order to make sure that we are driving the competitors out of business. A lot of independent bookstores have accused Walmart and Amazon of selling books below cost. And I've posted an article for you in the Chapter 14 content folder about a lawsuit around predatory pricing for bookstores. That's really a really interesting read. Now, it is legal to sell merchandise at any price you want, so long as your motive isn't to eliminate competition. So it's kind of hazy here when these small bookstores try to accuse Walmart and Amazon of selling books below cost to drive them out of business. Because Walmart or Amazon, as you'll see in the article I'm going to post, they're going to say that they're just pricing that as a loss leader, right? Leader pricing, and they're not trying to drive anyone out of business. So still a bit unethical, but legal as long as your motive isn't to eliminate your competition. Another issue in pricing is what we call horizontal price fixing. Horizontal price fixing involves agreements between retailers. And generally, these two retailers are in competition with each other, but they get together and decide they're going to set the same price. And they do this to try to reduce competition. And this is illegal. So when if two gas stations were to get together and decide that we're going to set gas at $3.09 and it's going to stay at $3.09, that could be considered horizontal price fixing if that number is higher than it should be. So retailers are trying to just make some additional profit there. Another issue is a bait and switch tactic. Bait and switch tactics are illegal. And a bait and switch tactic happens when a retailer tries to lure a customer into the store. And the way they do that is they advertise a product at a very low price, but then when a customer comes into the store, the sales reps try to push the customer towards a higher priced model. And so this used to happen a lot around Black Friday time. So retailers would advertise that they were selling a TV for $100. But if you got to the store, they might have only had one or two of those TVs in stock. And so those salespeople are trying to say, well, we sold out of those, but here's a $200 TV that's going to be so much better for you. And this is illegal because you're deceiving the customer. And so we don't see as much bait and switch happening today because the FTC does mandate rain checks be available. So now with the introduction of rain checks, which we talked about in Chapter 10, rain checks allow customers to come back and get the item at the low price when it's in stock. So hopefully, the introduction of rain checks, and we have seen that the introduction of rain checks has reduced the number of bait and switch cases we've seen happen. So the last issue that I want to bring your attention to is what we call a deceptive reference points. A reference point is the price against which buyers compare an actual selling price of the product to the regular price or original price. So deceptive reference points is inflating the price against which buyers compare a sales price to. So you might have seen this. You might have seen a reference point at TJ Maxx. So TJ Maxx always lists on their price tags TJ Maxx price compared to the manufacturer's price. Now, that's perfectly legal and perfectly ethical to do unless a retailer is trying to be deceptive. If a retailer is trying to be deceptive, that's when it becomes unethical. Because for the consumer, they might not necessarily know what a regular price is. And some retailers have been accused of setting reference points very high so that consumers think they're getting a good deal, even when they might not be. So what I've done here is I've identified and I've given a definition of these four legal and ethical pricing issues. So I want to hear your opinion on these matters, and I want you to try to see if you can find examples of retailers who've been accused of using any of these practices. And see if you can find recent examples, because a lot of the legal and ethical issues have decreased over the past 10 or 15 years. But there's still a few out there that would be interesting to share and talk about in the Chapter 14 discussion boards.